For more on this, I'm joined by Bernard Tamas, a professor at Valdosta State University. He's also an author of the book, Demise and Rebirth of American Third Parties. Thank you so much for being here with us. So I just want to start with the first point I made when I was talking about third parties, their relative lack of influence. Now, these candidates, I mean, they know they're not going to win, right? But in many ways, that's not really the point.
No, it's not really the point. It doesn't really matter actually if they're going to win, because that's not really the purpose that they play in American politics. I mean, their job actually is not necessarily to spoil elections, but to threaten. Basically, it's to disrupt with a purpose. And so the way that we usually look at it is that the third parties and independent candidates, their strategy is something called sting like a bee. So the idea is that they push through some sort of a galvanizing issue, something that appeals to a disaffected group that are unhappy with the major parties. And they use that to attack the party, basically cause them pain. And then what would happen is, when this is successful, the major parties respond by actually co-opting those issues. And that's the other part of being a bee, is after you sting, you die. Third parties in America have a bad tendency to die rapidly. But in the process, that's how they actually have influence over policy.
Interesting. So, but in that respect, I mean, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a bit of an enigma. He doesn't seem to fit that mold in terms of having that galvanizing issue or that certain platform. It's kind of all over the place.
Right. I would say that that's exactly the problem, and is really the weakness of his candidacy. Even though the numbers are high now, he's basically running a campaign with themes that seem to be contradicting themselves. He seems to be saying, on the one hand, that you can't trust scientists when it comes to vaccines, but on the other hand, you're supposed to trust scientists when they're telling you that climate change is a serious problem. On the one hand, he's pro-reproductive rights, which could help him in terms of attracting people far on the left. But on the other hand, he's very pro-Israel in terms of the Gaza conflict, which could actually persuade them against him. There really is lacking a clear theme from him. And while it might not be hurting him now, it seems like over time, that's something that could really pull down his candidacy.
So for the reasons that you outlined there, both parties have expressed worries that he might siphon critical voters. I mean, who has more reason to be worried, Biden or Trump?
Well, let's start with the reasons why there is any reason for them to be concerned about any of these candidates. The biggest problem for them is that this election is expected to be extremely close. I mean, Americans have become very, very polarized. And also with that, it's been something called negative partisanship, where Republicans really distrust Democratic politicians, Democrats really distrust Republican politicians, and so nobody is really moving. So there's this very small movement of the vote, and since 2000, it has been very close. So that's your first issue. The second issue, though, is that with RFK, and with actually most of these other candidates, we don't know where those votes are going to come from. I mean, even though taking even a small percentage of votes could shift the election, it's really not clear which of the candidates that they would be pulling votes from, because a lot of people who support third parties wind up being people who wouldn't vote at all in the first place.
Polls show many Americans are disappointed that we're getting a 2020 rematch, and they say they want something else. But do they really? I mean, would they vote for the right third-party candidate?
Well, here's the thing. The support for third parties has actually been going up steadily over the last, let's say, 50 years. And so we're seeing both the Libertarians and the Green Party gaining steady support. Now, we're not talking about anywhere near the levels where third parties were maybe 100 years ago when Teddy Roosevelt completely, crashed the political system in 1912. But we're still seeing them moving their way up. And what we're especially seeing is the Republican Party moving farther and farther to the right, and in many ways abandoning the traditional moderate conservatives. And so what you're seeing here is a gaping hole, a real problem that they're leaving for themselves. But at this point, there's no sign that the Libertarians are actually going to grab hold of this, or any other moderate party. So in a sense, it's not an issue so much with the third party movement as a movement as it is a problem with the strategies right now, that here is an ideal moment for third parties and independent candidates, but the strategies aren't really consistent with what actually works for them.
It's fascinating. We'll have to see what influence these candidates might have, especially considering how razor thin the margins might be. Bernard Thomas, thank you so much for your expertise. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.